Okay, well, I will try to be brief and within 10 minutes and go through some of the costs of war, perhaps absurdly fast, maybe 2 minutes, so I can move on. I think the first cost of war that I write down is foreign life. And when you see reports of war deaths in US newspapers, and there are only Americans listed there, you're not just missing the contractors and the suicides and the troops who died when they came home and so forth. You're missing over 99% of the deaths in our wars, as well as the wounded and the refugees and the traumatized and those who will be born with birth defects and cancer. And we have 4 million, almost 5 million refugees of our liberation of Iraq that don't really have stories in U.S. conversation. The second is, of course, U.S. life. I was in contact yesterday with the parents of a young man who was in the Air Force and in Afghanistan and had a desk job and was perfectly safe, nothing to worry about, and he killed himself. And I just couldn't stand to watch the video that these people sent me of themselves describing this, and the mother saying it took 3 inches of blue sleeve poking in the door and she knew, and the soldier weeping himself, informing her. 20 suicides this week already that I know of. I mean, leading cause of death for US troops in Afghanistan, suicide. Third is the danger of proliferation. We are spreading weapons, including nuclear weapons, around the world with an exponentially increased likelihood of absolute destruction, whether it begins intentionally or accidentally or whatever. Number 4, the danger of blowback. We think that people are safe at desk jobs. We think that people are safe operating unmanned aircraft from thousands of miles away. And yet, we are making ourselves hated around the world, which has consequences. Fifth is the destruction of the natural environment, of which war is a leading cause, not just a participant and motivated by fossil fuels and so forth, but the leading consumer of petroleum that we have is the U.S. military. The destruction of whole towns and regions. The migratory birds don't go to Afghanistan anymore. We are using war to destroy on a huge scale. Sixth, the economy. Your tax forms, the White House website will tell you we're spending 1/4 or less of our money on defense. We're spending almost nothing on defense, but we're spending about half of income tax and borrowing on war and the military, and debt for previous war and the military, and veterans care, and military operations through various governmental departments. It is absolutely destroying our economy. You put those same dollars into other industries and you create many more jobs, better paying jobs, better impact on the economy. And we, of course, beyond that, are far and away the leading supplier of weapons to the rest of the world. And many of our weapon sales are to fend off weapons we sold to other countries, and many of our wars are against weapons we sold or gave to other countries. Seventh, civil liberties go away with war, and go away permanently with permanent war. And Bradley Manning is an example of how we remove civil liberties from enemies and then from Americans. It's absolutely stunning what we're willing to tolerate. We went and protested at Quantico in Virginia, not far from where I live, the treatment of Bradley Manning, and as I was protesting and filming with my video camera, some of the Marine guards grabbed me and started to haul me off, and 30 peace activists grabbed me and pulled me back, which is a wonderful feeling, but they are going to grab us all eventually if we put up with them grabbing him. Eighth is our representative government, which goes away with war. The corruption of the dollars, the increased money, the privatization, and while there's this incredible incredible pretense of a difference between the Republicans and the Democrats, and they're not sure where he was born and so forth. It is John McCain and Buck McKeon from just north of here who have legislation in Congress that would give this president and all future presidents absolute power to make any war and to imprison anybody indefinitely, which is current policy, but this would put it in legislation. Ninth is our basic morality. We are trained to hate, to be racists, to be violent, to think that violence can work. And finally, we lose our grasp on honesty through war propaganda. We learn to think that lies are the way it's done, that liars get immunity afterwards, and to lie to ourselves and to lie about the officials who are in one political party as against the other political party. It's incredibly destructive. We learn that wars are based on lies, but we learn it too slowly. We have a majority that wants to go into Afghanistan, and then once it's underway, we have a majority that says, oops, we shouldn't have done that. Now we have 2/3, 3/4 that say, get out of there. We had a majority wanted to go into Iraq, and then pretty quickly we have a majority that says, no, we shouldn't have. We should get out of there. Right? But once it's started, it's very hard to end. You've got to support the troops. You've got to finish the mission. Even if the original justification for the mission has been exposed as a fraud and denounced universally, you still have to finish the mission. It's just a different mission. We have opposed attacking Iran to some effect, I think. We have turned against, as a public, in terms of polls, we have turned against this war in Libya faster than any previous war. And there is going to be disagreement in this room on whether we should have initially gone there into Libya to prevent the killing of people, because there really are cases where people are going to kill people. But we were not intervening. We were switching sides. We had been backing and arming Gaddafi up until the moment we were going to back these indigenous independent rebels led by a friend of the CIA who spent the past 20 years in Northern Virginia with no visible means of support 2 miles from the CIA. We were going in there with the most blatant hypocrisy. Right? Telling Saudi Arabia to go ahead and attack civilians in Bahrain as long as they would support our protecting civilians in Libya. And so I think that we can agree that we could have been doing things differently for decades. That we don't have to be backing and arming all of these dictators all over that region and then switching sides in particular cases. And that even if you buy the rationale for going into that war, it's past, it's done with, just like the weapons in Iraq, and we're still in Iraq, the protection of Benghazi, and we're still in Libya. And this is the way that wars go. And the side effects include the destruction of our Constitution and our legislature and the United Nations. The Department of Justice's arguments for Libya have nothing to do with humanitarian prevention of disaster, because it's not a legal ground for war. They have to do with regional stability, as if we were in the same region, and with the credibility of the United Nations. The same United Nations we brush aside for Iraq and we refuse to allow to visit Bradley Manning. And that same UN resolution is immediately violated by putting in foreign troops and by putting in arms. So at some point we have to stop and say, does getting into a war that's going to go for years and kill a lot of people have to be the only way we can do things? When immediately you have half the country that does support it because of other more typical war propaganda, the evil of Gaddafi. Right? Ed Schultz is just spitting mad with hatred about we need this war to kill Gaddafi, while other people are defending the very same war as philanthropy. And we very quickly get to the point where the philanthropy has ended, but you have to support the troops and continue the mission and so forth. And whether it's Iraq or any other war, we've lost the idea of accountability, right? You now have the Donald Trump position on Iraq. We put in all this blood and treasure, and there's still oil there. With what we can't leave now, right? And the war keeps going, and we've forgotten the lies that got it going in the first place. So what do we do as I run out of time? We need much more education. We need much more counter-recruitment. But that is where we're having success. We're not yet having success in terms of action. You know, the number one problem, I think, is that we don't have a force to compel representation out of our government. We have organizations that sell out to a political party. We have media outlets that sell out for access and for their own corporate agenda. Here we are, the eve of May Day, or Mission Accomplished Day, or Downing Street Memo Day, and we don't have a labor movement. We don't have a labor movement that tries to halt production. We have a labor movement that engages in theatrics. And we don't have an activist peace movement that tries to halt production. We engage in theatrics, and it's a step on the way, but we get arrested blocking sidewalks that nobody needs to walk down to keep this war going. You know, to send a message. We block the sidewalk in front of the White House and we go to jail, and it sends a message. But we need independent civil resistance that seeks to actually get something into the gears of the machine. So we need to build that up locally and at the state level, and eventually shut down Washington, D.C., which has a square called Freedom Plaza, which is the same name just about as Tahrir Square in Cairo. That's what we need to bring in. The score at this point in what we call the Middle East is nonviolence 3, violence 0. And we have to learn the lessons of those who are succeeding in the most powerful and most long-lasting way, and we have to bring it to Washington, D.C.